In the first moments of any catastrophe, chaos and confusion are the rule. The speed of a flash flood can overcome people before they realize the situation. Flash floods are unpredictable, infrequent, and kill people by catching them off guard.
Well, a flash flood is a rapid onset event caused by either rapid snow melt or a dam break or heavy rain, where the runoff occurs very rapidly, the water rises very rapidly, there's a great deal of water, and a flash flood is usually a deadly event.
So I'd gone from a perfectly dry, normal highway all of a sudden to being in water and not really understanding how I had gotten there, because I had no inkling that the road had been washed out and I had really been on a road that was no longer there.
When you're talking about tornadoes, it's pretty easy to recognize what's going on. There's a huge column of debris blowing around in a circle about 200 to 300 miles an hour, and it's making a huge roar. But a flood, at least at first, the flood just looks like heavy rain.
Now, I really didn't ever expect that I would be in a situation where I would be in a flood or underwater in a car or anything like that. I'd never had anticipated that type of thing happening to me.
Steve Miller survived a flash flood which killed 3 other people. Although proceeding with caution, he made a serious but common miscalculation. What Miller didn't know would almost kill him.
You really don't ever expect to be in a flash flood, especially when it's not been raining for 5 or 6 hours. In reflection, I think, why would I so stupid to think that the river wouldn't be that high 5 or 6 hours? But the fact that it had been raining for several hours, I'd come to the conclusion that the worst had passed.
One of the misconceptions in flash flooding is that it has to be raining heavy here in order to have a flash flood, and that's simply not the case. It can be raining upstream, especially in hilly or mountainous areas, and the water runs down into your area.
It was after midnight when Miller ended up in the roaring river with no idea how he had landed there. The shock of the event stunned him as the car changed from a familiar space into a steel coffin as it was pushed and shoved in the river's currents.
The river was very powerful. I could feel it moving the car. It seemed to be moving the car at a very good speed. I couldn't see anything except brown water in my face. The river was so powerful that the car just flew by underneath me when I popped to the surface. I remember trying to grab a hold of it because, as I said, it was kind of my security blanket at that point, and it wasn't until it disappeared that I started the second part of the plan, which was, now I got to get out of this river.
In survival situations, doing the next right thing is a way to organize the mind and keep the panic from becoming overwhelming. The mind can only focus on one thing at a time. This means that every survivor has an opportunity to make a choice.
If you do the right things in making an egress from a vehicle that has gone into the water, all you have done is to expand the window of opportunity for you to effect a safe self-rescue. You still have to swim to shore. You still have to handle the currents. You still have to handle the debris, perhaps some minor form of physical injury.
I can tell you that it is very powerful. It's much more powerful than you are. It was very cold, and as you went down the river, there were several times where I was pushed under the water and had to come back up to the surface. My whole thought was on getting out of the river, and that's the only thing that really mattered to me.
Flash floods kill people every year in situations that start off as routine rainstorms. Many times, people encounter flash floods because they ignore or discount warnings. Most evidence proves that deaths and damage occur from a lack of awareness.
The problems they can encounter is, one, a belief that they know how bad can get and underestimate how rapidly the water can rise or how deep it is or how fast it's moving. The other kind of a problem is that people just don't understand the true nature of the deadly events, and they just don't have a good comprehension of how powerful water can be when it's moving very quickly.
A major misconception about flash floods is that they are high waves, but the power of the flood comes from the flow of the water. Often the rushing water is less than knee-high. In fact, 6 inches of water can generate enough force to float a small car.
It takes 6 inches of running water to float a small car, and it takes a foot to a foot and a half to float a big car. Many people drive into a foot and a half of water with their sports utility van, feeling quite secure, both because they've seen deep water before and because they're in their sports utility vehicle. They felt pretty safe driving through it.
Most people become victims of flash floods for one reason. They remain in their cars where they feel safe. But vehicles are a death trap in a flash flood.
Unfortunately, we know that more people by vast, vast numbers die in cars than in any other way in flash floods. These are all preventable deaths where people drove into harm's way when they could have turned around or avoided the situation. People feel so safe in their cars, they feel impervious to Mother Nature, be it a tornado, be it a flash flood, be it a hurricane, and they get in harm's way and don't realize the true power of these storms.
A flash flood can move vehicles or buildings. It can rip apart houses. And it's not only water. Liquefied earth and debris can grind up everything in its path to reach its final destination.
A cubic foot of water weighs about 62 pounds. And if you can picture taking a fluid that weighs 62 pounds per cubic feet and having so much of it that it's running down streets and gullies and creeks until when it reaches the point where we're standing, there's over 8,000 cubic feet rushing by a given point per second. And each one of those cubic feet of water weighs 62 pounds. I think you can see why it's just a little bit more than anybody can handle.
At Universal Studios, their flash flood exhibit releases a water flow of 12,000 gallons over a 400-foot slope to demonstrate the force water can generate. This exhibit is only a fraction of the volume of a real flood. Yet a man cannot even stand, let alone keep his balance, when the 12-inch high wave hits. In a real flash flood, the water could flow over 1,000 times faster, churning and thrusting huge boulders, tree trunks, mud, and other debris into a devastating river of unyielding fury.
We're seeing more and more of these problems in urban areas because of the urban sprawl, and the rain has no place to go into the ground, and so it runs down streets and sewers and causes problems. That is opposed to the problems we encounter on rural streets where you have flash floods and dry washes, or normally small trickling streams that become raging torrents, and people are used to driving by them or driving through them without a problem, and suddenly they encounter water moving at a very rapid speed that may be 2, 3, 4 feet deep and just pushes their car into the stream.
The best idea for avoiding flash floods is to be aware of flood areas. Don't drive in water over a few inches deep, and stay out of flowing water. Stay away from creeks and streams during and after heavy rain. And if you see sheets of water flowing through the streets, move to higher ground.
We tend to find three themes in terms of why people tend to die in these storms. One, they don't get the warning, or they're not paying attention. Secondly, they don't believe it or don't believe it can apply to them. Or thirdly, they drive into harm's way, oblivious of the threat in front of them. So the bottom line is your survival depends upon your knowledge of what's going on and how to stay out of danger.